This happened in early March of last year. It was still a cold period, but the constant rain had already washed away the worst of winter. The ground remained damp and slippery in the mornings, but the temperature was starting to rise enough for me to resume my outdoor hobbies: hiking, camping, and cycling. Activities I had to put aside for the past 3 months. That day, I was driving to a place I had visited the previous fall. I liked it because it was isolated and rarely visited, a perfect retreat to relax and enjoy the scenery alone. I parked by the roadside and walked for about 45 minutes to my camping spot, which was nothing more than a small patch of cleared ground with a decent view of the forest. The sun was already beginning to set when I set up my things. I always preferred arriving at camp later just to eat and go to sleep shortly after. After organizing everything, I went out to gather some dry branches and prepare for a small campfire. Then I walked to a higher point to watch the sunset. I hadn't been there for more than a minute when I noticed a flickering light below me through the trees. It was a fire burning, not too far away. The strange thing was that there were no signs of a campsite nearby: no tent, no chairs, no one around. The fire seemed to have been left there, burning on its own. Besides being dangerous, it was odd. I assumed that whoever had lit that fire would return at some point, so I watched for a while. An hour passed, the sun had completely set, and no one showed up. Even stranger, the fire seemed to be getting stronger, as if someone had placed enough wood to keep it burning for hours. That made me uneasy. The fact that I was so close to the fire, yet saw no one around, bothered me. So I decided to go down there to put it out, if no one was nearby. The walk took only 2 minutes, but with the darkness, I had to use my flashlight. As soon as I arrived, the atmosphere was eerily silent. The only sounds were the light rain and the crackling of the fire. The flames were too high for something that had been left unattended. There were logs underneath, still intact, indicating that someone wanted the fire to last a long time. I grabbed some dirt and threw it over the flames, trying to put them out. It worked to some extent, reducing the fire enough for me to remove the larger logs and extinguish it completely. After a few minutes, the fire was finally out. The place was plunged into an eerie, unsettling darkness. That's when I heard footsteps nearby. I raised my flashlight and looked in the direction of the sound. In the middle of the darkness, the silhouette of someone appeared, walking toward my campsite. I stood up immediately. "Hey, did you light that fire?" The person stopped about 50 meters away, still covered by the darkness. "Hello? I can see you there. Can you answer me?" No response. A chill ran down my spine. Something told me I needed to get out of there, fast. I pretended to ignore the person's presence and continued packing my things as quickly as possible. The whole time, the figure remained there, watching me. As soon as I finished packing my backpack, I threw it over my shoulders and started walking back. They stayed in place as I moved away. I climbed the trail as fast as I could and returned to my car. As soon as I got in, I called the police and reported what had happened. To this day, I don't know who was there or what their intentions were. Were they trying to start a fire? Or did they do it just to get my attention? Luckily, I didn't stay to find out. This happened a few years ago during a period of heavy rain. That night, I was working from home as a customer service representative, and I was on my late shift from 4 p.m. to midnight. I went upstairs to my office, closed the door, and started working. The first half of the shift was smooth and went by quickly. I took my dinner break and returned to work. After that, the pace slowed down significantly. I was sitting at my desk, staring at the blank screen and waiting for any calls when, suddenly, I heard a loud noise coming from somewhere in the house. I took off my headphones and looked at the door. I stood up, walked over, and opened it, trying to listen more carefully. But I didn't hear anything else. I assumed it was just the rain hitting something outside, and since I couldn't leave my desk for too long, I left the door open and got back to work. I quickly forgot about the noise as nothing else happened and my headphones drowned out any external sounds. However, when I was almost done with my shift, around 11:30 p.m., I heard another noise. This time, it was quieter, but it triggered an unsettling feeling in me, something that made me uneasy. I got up from my chair and stepped into the hallway again. As soon as I looked ahead, a chill ran down my spine. The door at the end of the hallway was wide open. How was that possible? I froze for a few seconds, trying to process what I was seeing. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a shadow moving along the wall. Someone was standing at the base of the staircase. Even though I couldn't see their face, I could clearly make out their silhouette in the darkness. My heart started racing. I took a few steps back, went into my office, and locked the door. With trembling hands, I grabbed my phone and dialed the police. My breathing was rapid as I kept my eyes fixed on the gap under the door, waiting to see a shadow move or hear footsteps coming up the stairs. But nothing happened. No sound of movement, no shadow approaching. When the police arrived and searched the house, they found it completely empty. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken doors or windows. To this day, no one knows how that person got in or what their intentions were. The scariest part? With my office door open, that person must have walked right past me while I was working. They probably saw me sitting there, distracted, wearing headphones. I never found out what they wanted, but this experience still haunts me. I was staying in a cabin in a quiet rural town located near a well-known resort that I often visit whenever I have the chance. The accommodations within the resort were extremely expensive, so many visitors opted to rent these more remote cabins, which offered comfort at a much more affordable price. It was only the third day of my trip, and I had spent almost the entire day exploring the region. I returned to the cabin around 7 p.m., deciding to end my outing earlier than planned, since the rain had intensified after sunset, making the weather uncomfortable and the road harder to navigate. As soon as I entered, I took a hot shower to warm up, prepared something to eat, and after dinner, I sat by the fireplace to relax. The atmosphere was pleasant, and the sound of the rain outside made everything feel even cozier. But that moment of tranquility was interrupted when I heard footsteps outside. The noise wasn't from the rain hitting the roof or water running over the dirt ground. It was distinct footsteps, growing closer to the cabin's entrance. At first, I waited for the person to knock on the door, but that didn't happen immediately, which made me feel slightly uneasy. I remained silent, listening carefully, until finally, after a few seconds, someone knocked. With some caution, I got up and went to the door, hesitating for a moment before opening it. Maybe the fact that I was alone in the cabin made me feel a greater sense of responsibility, as if I had to handle whatever situation arose. As soon as I unlocked and pulled the door open, I found myself face to face with a man standing there. He looked to be in his early 30s, with dark hair and a thick beard. What immediately caught my attention was his expression of mild surprise upon seeing me, as if he hadn't expected me to answer. However, that reaction quickly faded, and he tried to mask it as if nothing had happened. Not wanting to show my discomfort, I politely asked if he needed anything. The man gave a strange smile, and instead of answering directly, asked who I was. I found that unusual and returned the question. That's when he claimed he had booked the cabin for that night. I frowned and told him that wasn't possible since I had reserved the cabin for the entire week, and as far as I knew, there were no errors in the booking system. I asked him to show me some kind of proof, but he simply dodged the question and gave a weak excuse, saying there might have been a misunderstanding. At that moment, the situation started to feel unsettling. I knew for sure that my reservation was correct, so I simply apologized for the supposed mix-up and started closing the door. But before I could, the man quickly placed his hand on it, stopping me from shutting it completely. With a forced smile, he asked if he could come in for just a few minutes to clear up the situation, claiming it was too cold to stand outside in the rain. Although his excuse might have made sense in any other circumstance, there was something about his behavior that made me uneasy. It wasn't just the fact that he was insisting on entering, but the way he was doing it, trying to pass himself off as harmless and friendly, when in reality, something in his eyes and gestures suggested the opposite. Keeping my composure, I once again said I couldn't let him in, wished him good night, and pushed the door firmly shut before he could insist again. I remained silent for a few seconds, just listening. The man didn't walk away immediately, which only heightened my sense of alertness. He stood there for at least 30 seconds, before finally beginning to walk away from the cabin. Still suspicious, I kept an eye on what was happening outside, but since nothing else occurred in the following minutes, I tried not to worry too much. I figured that if there was a real issue, that the property management would contact me soon. So I sat on the couch, turned on the TV at a low volume for some background noise, and scrolled through my phone while snacking, trying to forget the incident and enjoy the rest of the night. About 2 hours passed, and I was starting to feel sleepy, but suddenly, the memory of the man came back to my mind. I didn't know exactly why, but it bothered me enough to make me get up and go to the door again. Something felt off. I looked out the window, carefully observing the outside. The rain was still pouring heavily, making the night even darker and colder. However, as I directed my gaze toward the nearby forest, a chill ran down my spine. There was someone standing among the trees. The distance and darkness made it difficult to see clearly, but the motionless silhouette in the middle of the woods sent an immediate wave of fear through me. I couldn't say for sure if it was the same man from before, but everything pointed to it. The fact that someone was standing there in the rain, just watching the cabin without approaching or trying to hide, was more than enough to alarm me. My heart raced, and without hesitation, I quickly returned to the couch, grabbed my phone, and called the town's management, explaining the situation. They wasted no time and called the police. The officers arrived faster than I expected, driving up the dirt road toward the cabin. The man in the forest also noticed their approach, but to my surprise, he didn't try to run. When the police searched him, they discovered that he was carrying a leather bag containing various tools commonly used for breaking into homes, along with a hunting knife. That revelation made my blood run cold. It became evident that he had never booked the cabin at all. It was all a lie to gain easier access, probably hoping to find someone careless enough to let him walk through the door without question. And the scariest part of all, if I hadn't checked before going to sleep, if I had simply ignored that strange feeling I had, maybe I wouldn't be here now to tell this story.